Hello there, people of the internet. Today I want to talk to you guys about self-sustaining your ammunition. In the gun community, we love talking about the various things that we do to try and prolong our likelihood of survival in, say, a bad situation, and a lot of it has to do with us essentially stockpiling as many goods and supplies as we can possibly get our hands on. And there's definitely I got the hiccups, guys, I'm sorry about that. There's definitely some merit to stockpiling as many goods and supplies as you possibly can, but no matter how much you have, you're gonna either run out or something's gonna happen, a natural disaster, a fire, somebody showing up whenever you're not around and packing all your stuff into their truck and getting out of town and whatnot. Things happen to where you definitely 100% have the likelihood of losing all of the stuff that you have stockpiled. And so as a result, knowing how to self-sustain your ammunition to where you're not reliant on the grid to provide you with this ammunition. Oh my goodness, that was one heck of a hiccup. That was a hiccup so hard I felt my ears pop. Whenever I talk a bunch, I get the hiccups. I have no idea why that happens. But whenever you get to the point to where you're not reliant on the grid to sustain your ammunition needs, you start to no longer care about the state of what the grid can provide in terms of ammunition. Like, for example, I have a tremendous number of things that I have to make ammunition for. I enjoy doing it. I mean, this is definitely one of my biggest hobbies, as you can see with all the stuff I have behind me. But I don't think I've bought factory ammo for anything in, like, years at this point. Simply because the ammunition setup that I have is self-sustaining to the point to where I need very, very little in order to keep going. So let me go ahead and dive right into this. Do I have any of my stuff around me? I do not. So I've made a couple of videos on the YouTube channel where I have talked about how I load brass cases with black powder. More often than not, I will load black powder 308 to take out and shoot in this particular Mauser. This right here is an Oviedo Mauser chambered in 7.62, technically 7.62 set me, but it fires 7.60 NATO just fine, and I load black powder 308 for it. I have no idea why, but the Spanish rifling for these rifles just handles black powder fouling extraordinarily well. Like, I don't lose accuracy with these Spanish rifles whenever I'm running black powder, and I have zero clue as to why that is, but I load up like 100+ rounds at a time and I'll shoot the whole bag without cleaning the thing, and I'm still smacking a 6-inch plate at 100 yards with regular intervals. So the reason why I load black powder inside of my brass cases is because I make it myself. And since I make it myself, I can make it really, really cheap. Like, I can make a pound of black powder for probably about $3, which is a hell of a lot more cost effective than if I was loading it with smokeless powder, which I would more than likely have to go out and buy. So I have the element where I'm making my own gunpowder for very, very small amounts of money. This way I can go out and I can plink with my guns and not absolutely break the bank like you would if you were just going to go out and buy factory ammunition. Like, going out and spending 100 rounds of this black powder 308 going downrange through my Oviedo Mauser, that's just pennies. That's just a drop in the bucket, especially because I reuse brass and some other things that we'll get into here in a second. If you do that same thing with fresh factory ammo, which is going to be more like 80 cents a shot, let's say you burn that 100 rounds, you're looking at 80 to $100 in ammo just for that range day, and that's why I got into making my own gunpowder. But actually, I got some of that right here. Gunpowder in a whiskey bottle. How do you like that? This right here is the stuff. This is not proper gunpowder storage, but this is the stuff that I am literally about to load into some various cartridges that I have. But I can make this. I know how to make this literally from scratch, like not buying anything from the store. I know how to grow nitrates. Then you gather charcoal, and there's tons of sulfur in the groundwater here in Florida. That might be a little bit more difficult for some people to gather depending on where it is that you live. But you don't need sulfur to make gunpowder. Like, you can make rather effective gunpowder out of just the nitrates in the charcoal. As a matter of fact, look that up. People have done it. People don't believe me whenever I say that, but it's a real thing. You don't need the sulfur. The sulfur just makes it more powerful, but you don't need it. So you can do what I'm doing without the sulfur. If you have bodily organs, then you can make nitrates. If you have the ability to make fire, then you can make charcoal. But I can't really go into the specifics on how to actually make the powder because of YouTube's rules, but there's plenty of people out there who have talked about that, and we'll go ahead and let you hunt down that information somewhere else. So we have the aspects of making the powder. Now the projectiles. I have a good number of cast lead bullets because I have molds that I use. These particular ones are 308, and as you can see, they're lubed because it's very hard to look in and actually see the projectiles, but they're just cast lead bullets. And since I load my cartridges for the most part with black powder just because of the cost-effective savings, it really doesn't matter what kind of lead it is that I'm using. My homemade powder, it doesn't burn particularly hot, and I normally try to rock around a 2F granule size for powder. Granted, I will make some 3F from time to time, but more often than not, I just kind of rock the 2F. So with those stipulations, I don't have to worry about, say, gas checks, which would go on the rear of the bullet to kind of increase your likelihoods of avoiding leading. If you start sending your lead projectiles down your barrel at any real significant velocities, you just don't get those velocities with black powder. Not unless you are like really compressing your powder, or if you are rocking a really lightweight bullet with a really big powder charge or something like that. Just black powder, it's not that great of a propellant, so I don't really bother worrying about leading all that much. Like with all the different black powder rounds that I load for a good number of my rifles, I really don't worry about leading all that much. So I don't have to worry about gas checks to be able to send these projectiles downrange. If I load those cast bullets with smokeless powder, then I got plenty of gas checks I can toss into the back. But that's one of those things where you got to make them precise. There's dyes out there that you can make your own gas checks with, but the factory gas checks are just so much better. Whenever you throw a homemade gas check on the back of a lead projectile, I found that it just does not meet the requirements for accuracy that I would be comfortable with. It's possible, but it's just not something that I would want to do, which is why most of my bullets don't have gas checks on them. If they do, then they're factory gas checks. So that's one of those things that you could make on your own with your own self-sustainment stuff, but I don't really bother with it with my black powder loadings. As for the primers themselves, these right here, these are some of those things that you will have issue with sourcing if things go bad, but you can get a lot of them right now for not a lot of money. These are little, like, caps that you would use for an old school cap gun. I can get like 1,200 of these for $6, and I got a fair amount of storage. I very literally just take like a hole punch for paper. Do I have it around me anywhere? I do not. I literally just take a hole punch for paper, and I punch out. A lot of people say they punch out 3 of these, but I go ahead and I punch out 5 of them just to go ahead and ensure that I have more reliable detonation. I punch out 5 of these, and then I use an actual like metal punch to flatten my primer, and I just kind of pack these bad boys into that, and I press the anvil back into the primer, and my primer is reloaded. Now, you don't have to use these. Like, this is one of those examples where if you run out of these or find yourself in a situation where you no longer have access to them, then what are you going to do? There's various chemicals that you can use, which I don't know if I'm allowed to tell you what those are, but believe me, whenever I say if you look them up, you can see that you probably already have them around your household. On top of those, you can actually go out and get yourself like a full-fledged primer reloading kit that has those chemicals that you'll probably be able to find around your household. It has those chemicals that you literally just take with like an eyedropper, and you drop it into the actual primer itself, and then you let it dry, and then you set your anvil down on top of that, and then you have a reloaded primer. But long story short, there are ways to be able to reload your primers. If you want to go with the match head method. If you take a match head and you take the strike face on the box and you crumble up the match head and you scrape off the strike face, you want to do like a 50-50% mix. Oftentimes I'll wet it down with some alcohol to make like a pasting. I'll let it dry. And while it's still wet, I'll pack it down into the primer so it kind of stays inside the primer, and I'll set the anvil on top of it. And that's a really good way to be able to reload your primers as well. Bottom line, there's ways to reload primers, but in the event that you are unable to find any real way to reload your primer, that's one of the reasons why I advocate somebody goes out and gets themselves something like this. This is a flintlock muzzle loader. I almost call it a musket, but it's not a musket. It is a rifled musket. But these are one of those kinds of guns which you can run pretty much indefinitely. Finding flint or some sort of striking surface to be able to create spark really is not that hard of a thing to do. If you can manage to find flint, great. Even the flint that you have, you can continuously sharpen until it's basically gone and nothing exists anymore. But if you were to take, say, the magnesium piece from a fire starter or a lighter or something like that and fashion your own, I don't know, rod or something like that with that piece on the end of it to where you can fasten that into your flint mechanism right here. You pull the trigger, that strikes the steel right there, and it creates spark anyway. There's plenty of ways that you'll be able to set this off. Even if you don't want to go through the process of all of that, you can very literally just fill up your pan right here and take a lighter. Whenever I tell people about this, I don't really want to call it a trick or a hack or anything, but it kind of is. Whenever I tell people about this, they're like, oh no, there's no way you'll be able to do that. That's impossible. That's stupid. And I'm like, that's exactly how they used matchlocks back in the day. It was literally just some dude holding a piece of burning twine or match or whatever it is that he was doing. Nowadays we have lighters. You literally just take aim at your target, light your lighter, whoosh, bang, fantastic, send that downrange. This is a really good way to be able to send lead downrange without having to worry about ignition sources, because there's so many different ways that you can ignite these things, as opposed to something like a metallic cartridge, where you are limited to needing to ignite it with a primer. If something happens and you cannot reload those primers, then you can still load your cast projectiles inside of your flintlock, and you can, you know, use your homemade gunpowder inside of your flintlock, and you don't have to worry about having to source what you need to reload primers. So those are probably some of the best ways to be able to have self-sustaining ammunition. Make your own powder, which is very easy to do. You can look it up and like get it set up to be able to happen in like an afternoon. Make your own powder, cast your own bullets. Again, very, very easy to do. And learn to reload your own primers. Again, very easy to do, very cost effective, very simple. Like, there's really nothing that goes into reloading cases, cartridges, or anything like that. And with me doing this myself, like I said, I don't have to worry about the situation of any ammunition on the grid. That being said, I still buy like 223 and 9mm and all of your mainstream cartridges, just because reloading for those really doesn't advocate a reason. Like, there's no real reason to reload for those whenever you can just buy them for the same price, with the exception of 308, just because I can reload 308 for like 10 cents a shot, considering all of the stuff that I have going into it, versus reloading it with like store-bought stuff, which would be more like 80 cents a shot. And by that point, you may as well just go out and buy say surplus 7.62 NATO or something like that. So there we go, self-sustained ammunition, or at least this is how I do it, and I feel like I can continue to go for quite some time, especially since I can continue to renew my resources. Thanks for watching. I appreciate your time. Like, subscribe, share. Description below is a link to all sorts of stuff. Go check it out. You guys go off. Have yourself a fantastic day. I'll see you in the next episode.
Been a little while since I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. Poor man's Garrett. It's a shame that bolt-action shotguns aren't more mainstream.